This episode of To The Point is sponsored by Tarsus. Tarsus Pharmaceuticals applies proven science and new technology to revolutionize treatment for patients, starting with eye care. Tarsus is advancing its pipeline to address several diseases with high unmet need across a range of therapeutic categories, including eye care, dermatology, and infectious disease prevention. Tarsus is proud to announce that Xdemvy Lotilaner Ophthalmic Solution 0.25% is now available to prescribe.
Ocular surface disease. It's complex, chronic, and progressive, but rife with opportunity for the enterprising optometrist.
The mission of this podcast is to make this condition more understandable and accessible to those interested in specializing in it. So let's get to the point. Welcome to another episode of the To The Point podcast. My name is Jackie Garlick, and I am joined by my co-host, Leslie Odell. Hi, Leslie.
Hi. How's it going?
It's going good. Today, we are going to be giving a rundown on the diagnostic tools that you can purchase for your growing dry eye clinic. And we're going to kind of give a rundown on low end and then go up to more high end options for diagnostic testing. So I think what we're going to start with is some of the lower end options that you should have or can have in your practice. So Leslie, what should we start with here? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I will say that with dry eye being such, at the top of minds of companies and also doctors, and we're always trying to seek better ways to make an easy diagnosis because it's still a very underdiagnosed and undertreated disease state, we are not at a loss of things to talk about. I feel like there is a lot of technology. Every time I feel like I turn around, I'm seeing something new and exciting coming out, and it's easy to want, to be able to have it all when you're building out your practice, but sometimes you have to really be able to graduate into different levels of diagnostics. So I think if you start at the basics, some of things that we talked about early on would just be the vital dye stains. If you look at what you would use as your foundation for treating dry eye, TFOS DUES 2, for example, the diagnosis of dry eye disease is made based on symptoms and then vital dye testing. So fluorescein and lissamine green are easy to find and not that expensive to add. And I think that's definitely one of the first things that I would want to have to do a good dry eye evaluation.
Yeah, agreed. I have also, I think right next to that should be your Schirmer testing strips. It's a stand-up box, looks just like the others.
Yeah.
Just add that to your shelf.
Yeah, so Schirmer strips, can be this what we're used to seeing with hinged over the bottom eyelid and kind of the measuring stick. You can also look to things like the phenol red thread. I know some doctors really love that. It gives results in a lot quicker of a time, maybe 5 seconds, I think. And then also it's a string that you put in and it kind of highlights, and then you measure when the string has changed color. The other one
I've never used that.
Yeah, I honestly don't use it a lot either, but I know when I'm lecturing with other doctors that are doing a lot of dry eye management, they really, speak highly of that phenol red thread. One that I'm starting to use is made by Quidel, and it's called the SM tube, and it looks like a ruler on two sides. And one side is for the right eye, one side is for the left eye, and you're using the tear meniscus to kind of, with a pipette type, action, acquire some of the tears, and it quickly measures what their Schirmer is. And that's another very fast test that's done within seconds versus the traditional 1 or 5 minutes, depending on if you're doing the proparacaine or no proparacaine with the traditional Schirmer. So I know that, I feel sometimes doctors think, oh, Schirmer's so antiquated, but it's still a big part of, FDA trials. It's still a big part of some of what the medications labeling is. So, depending on what medications you're starting, it also is very helpful for me for when I'm trying to uncover more of a systemic disease. So I do like Schirmer testing, but it is nice to kind of have some options that are not the traditional, piece of paper.
Yeah. Good point. The other thing that I have found useful is the MGE, the Meibomian Gland Evaluator. Is that what it's actually called? I always call it MGE.
Yeah.
And that was developed by Dr. Korb.
Correct.
I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then I actually got that through my J&J rep, Steve. Shout out to Steve and his colleague. I forgot who was with him. But that's another useful tool and a nicer way to sort of standardize when you're looking at the meibomian glands and judging the function of those. So that's a nice way to, I think standardize that. I mean, I think it's an easy thing to push on the glands and say, yeah, these look turbid or like no expression, but like to have a better sort of standardized way to do that. The MGE, is a nice tool for that.
Yeah, and is nice and a very low cost, and the best way to get that is to touch base with your J&J rep. Maybe even like the contact lens rep might be a good place to start, but it is part of their ocular surface section. And just like you said, Dr. Korb developed that to be standardized pressure. So it's 3 pounds per square inch, which is what your, or 0.3 pounds per square inch, which is what your pressure of your blink is. And so when I'm pressing against it with my thumb versus you're pressing against it with your thumb or somebody else, we're all pushing with different pressures. And so it is a good way to kind of have a standardized measurement. And sometimes shocking to see the difference between if you are using your finger to kind of manually evaluate the glands and then you do MGE, you're going to usually get kind of a worse result, which makes sense because the blink isn't as forceful as we are kind of manipulating the lids when we're pushing with our thumb. So I do agree MGE is a great tool for figuring out the function of the glands for sure.
The other thing that we could mention are two different instruments. So like the Karpecki debrider versus the Mastrota paddle are two other options that are relatively inexpensive and, in-office instruments that you could use.
Yeah, so I think that Mastrota paddle was developed more with the intent, I think, for maybe being able to evaluate gland.
Treat.
But I think also like to help with expression. But I think it was also first intended to be a diagnostic, you put it in and use a cotton tip to kind of push out the meibum. Now the Karpecki debrider, I like a lot. It has a nice smooth edge. And so what I found actually I was using a foreign body spud for a long time to kind of clean off the meibomian glands before I did assess them, or if there was the meibomian gland kind of like cyst looking at the edge that I wanted to kind of uncap. And it is pretty sharp. I felt, the sharper edge is the foreign body spud, but it makes sense. You're trying to dig out a foreign body, from the cornea is what it's intended for. So I do really like the Karpecki debrider for that reason, that it's just not as a sharp edge. It's a little bit dulled down and does a really good job for that debridement of the lids, which I think is important before you actually do your MGE. So it's sort of, you clean off the lid to then evaluate what's coming out. I think that those tools kind of can go hand in hand.
You know what I've been using to basically debride is the clearance assistant from TearCare. I'll use that, which I feel like works pretty well.
Yeah, kind of a very similar edge, which, that expressor that TearCare pairs with their treatment unit is very good. Also, I've used a bunch of different ones over the years and I can't even remember them all, but it's good just to kind of experiment with them and get comfortable with one. The one I use most commonly in addition to that TearCare expressor is a Katina. And basically it looks much like the TearCare expressor. It's just a little bit smaller of a plate. And so it may be targeting 1 to 2 glands versus 3 glands. But I will say that because this area is smaller, it's a little bit more painful for the patient. So the one that TearCare did or Sight Sciences paired with their Tear Care system, I like because it is a lot less uncomfortable to the patient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. What else can we talk about in the low cost price point?
Well, we talked about this a lot in another episode, but the biggest low cost you already own, and it's your transilluminator. So I feel like two things: your transilluminator, is helping for that inadequate nighttime lid seal by again shining it on the top lid in the dark room, and then it also could be the poor man's mybography.
Mybographer,
right? Yes. So the transilluminator is one, and then the other one is your finger. So just being able to assess the lid laxity by doing the snap test, pulling down on that bottom lid and seeing how quickly it bounces back. And then also same thing, lifting up the top lid to look to see how loose that might be if you're thinking about like a floppy lid syndrome or something like that. So those are two things that are already in your office and don't cost us anything. So, but when you look at TFOS dues too, especially again, that questionnaire, questionnaire is something that we all need to be doing, and it is another low cost diagnostic. So whether it's the speed or the OSDI or the DEQ5, finding one you're comfortable with and implementing that. Aside from the vital dye, the next diagnostic is the tear breakup time. So you have the fluorescein again. But there's a lot of cool science coming into that space with non-invasive tear breakup time, measurements, and how that might interfere with vision and such, that breaking up reading rates and things like that. Which kind of lends into what we were going to talk about with one of the diagnostic tools that's been really coming to the forefront, I would say, of giving us a pretty concise idea of what's going on with the patient with the Oculus, the 5M. That piece of equipment is really impressive. It can do non-invasive tear breakup time. It can do mybography. It's doing this customized tear report, the crystal report, I think, crystal tear report. So it's giving you a lot of diagnostics before you even have the patient in the exam chair.
One thing I just remembered we forgot is point of care testing, which I know we have covered in I'm talking about the Oculus as sort of a more expensive purchase, but point of care testing, we talked about that previously in a different podcast, but that's another lower cost option. Inflamadry, Tear Lab, two good options for that.
Yep. And again, when I think about, just how I lay out my dry eye exam, I put Tear Lab first because osmolarity is another diagnostic that's defining dry eye. So Tear Lab is giving us our osmolarity readings, and that, is expected to be changing and adding some other diagnostics that are more inflammatory in origin with interleukin and MMP9 in their discovery unit that should be available sometime in our country, is available in Europe right now. But then MMP9 kind of goes into the, when you're trying to subtype and get to your treatment plan, MMP9 is very helpful at Inflamadry is very helpful at uncovering MMP9 levels, which, tell us that there is inflammation present. So definitely point of care testing is, and I will say, on the lower side of an acquisition cost. Now, with the Tear Lab system, you do have disposables. So you do have to pay for the machine, and then you have to pay to keep that machine working.
So mid-range, maybe. Not really high end, but
Yeah, I would say mid-range. But
mid-range.
Something that I think if you have the ability to do point of care testing, something you should be considering early in, because it's telling you a lot about the patient and the disease and even how treatments are going.
This episode of To The Point is sponsored by Tarsus. Tarsus Pharmaceuticals applies proven science and new technology to revolutionize treatment for patients, starting with eye care. Tarsus is advancing its pipeline to address several diseases with high unmet need across a range of therapeutic categories, including eye care, dermatology, and infectious disease prevention. Tarsus is proud to announce that Xdemvy Lotilaner Ophthalmic Solution 0.25% is now available to prescribe.
So you sort of started to segue us into like the more expensive, higher cost diagnostic equipment that you can purchase for your practice. One of them, you and I have been talking about this previously, but the Oculus, the K5M, which is, as you said, a device that does a lot of interesting things and gives you a lot of information. That's also coupled with a topographer as well. So you have mybography, topography in there, many, I feel like, bells and whistles to the K5M. But there are others, certainly other mybographers, and we can just list out a couple of those. LipiView, LipiScan, which I've seen LipiView before, but I have no experience with LipiScan.
Okay. So both of them I think are great mybographers. LipiView, it's actually LipiView 2 because the LipiView system that first came with LipiFlow did not have mybography. So it was a scan that was measuring lipid layer thickness and blink rates, and it did not have mybography. And so LipiView 2 came a few years after the introduction of LipiFlow, and it incorporated their mybography, which is really impressive, the way that it uses the infrared light and gives different scans to really be able to visualize the glands. It's really easy for a tech to use both of their pieces of equipment. The difference between the two is that LipiView 2 also is giving us the blink rate, which is important because you see a lot of the partial blink. So if you're treating that computer user that has a lot of dry eye disease, and you want to show them what's happening at the screen, or you have a contact lens patient that's really suffering with dry eye, and you already know they're blinking less, but if you can show them that they're having 8 out of 10 partial blinks, that speaks to the patients, and they really understand that, they get that. It also gives you this lipid layer thickness, which can be really impressive when you do like a pre and post treatment analysis. When you're releasing mybum, you can really see that layer bulk up, which you would expect. LipiScan is nice because it is a smaller footprint. And it's, again, very easy to train technicians to run that machine. It's only doing the mybography report, or imaging rather, with that. But I've been very impressed with the images that come from their systems.
I was just going to say that I have had my images taken with a couple of different pieces of equipment, and it was actually, I misspoke. I had it taken on the LipiScan, not the LipiView, but the quality of that image was so much better than some other mybographers that I've actually tried. So I didn't really realize there was such a difference in like the quality of those images. I kind of felt they were all probably similar in some way, but I do feel like that quality is amazing.
And in that case, because you shared some of those pictures and it looked like you went from having glands to not having glands.
Exactly.
I guess, when you commit to something, you would only have usually one imaging system, so you're going to be looking at the patient with the same thing. So, but if it's showing less glands, you're going to be far more aggressive in your treatment than maybe you would need to be. It's definitely interesting how different some of those imaging systems can be. So the other one, so Oculus does a very good job with their K5M, their mybography. I've used that again, from other doctors when we're doing different research projects, and it seems pretty tech easy. They get really great images of the superior glands, the inferior glands. So, I do really like that. And then the newer one, a couple newer ones. One is MyBox, which I have some experience with. I like it because it's small. It has the smallest footprint of any of these. It fits into the ruby lens of your slit lamp, and then, just saves the images on your computer desktop. It can do superior, inferior, and you could train a tech to do it, but I usually ended up taking those photos because it's done at the slit lamp. And for me, if I wanted superior glands, it was far easier to invert lids using that technology than to evert the lid behind a big machine, and I'm leaning over the machine and also trying to evert the lid on the lighting source. So I do really like the MyBox for that reason. And I think that he that's an optometry found company with Dr. Trin. And I think that he, is even capturing some video in his second version. So it definitely is something to be on the lookout for. And that's called Box Medical Solutions, I think is his company.
Yeah, the other nice thing is that is portable. Like you can move that from room to room, which is great if you have, multiple exam rooms that you're going to be wanting to get images from.
Yeah, and as far as that goes, it's a nice lower cost mybographer.
Right.
And like you said, you can move it from one room to the next, which makes it really, really convenient.
There's also the Antares, which is from Luminous, the company that has one of the IPLs. They also have a mybographer as well that does blink rate and tear breakup time.
Yeah, I think they do non-invasive tear breakup time with that instrument as well. I think really when you're looking to maybe bring something in, at least from where I am now, I'm building out a medically focused practice where dry eye will still be a big part of that. But I'm trying as much as I can to get instruments that do more than one thing, and also take up less space in an office. So I'm really looking hard at what can do non-invasive tear breakup time, because I think that's really important moving forward. If I'm going to be doing patient care, but definitely if I'm going to be doing any kind of research, I know that that's a big part of where research is heading. They want to see that non-invasive tear breakup time.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing that we should maybe mention is which is like a anterior segment camera. So if you are wanting to, I find this actually to be more helpful, not as much from a billing perspective, but from a patient education standpoint. It's so much nicer when I can show a patient, like, this is what's on your lashes, or this is what your meibomian gland looks like, I find that to be really useful. And there's certainly higher end, cameras that adapt right to your slit lamp, but then you can also do a very low end iPhone with an iPhone adapter and achieve similar results. And I've seen a lot of people actually use their iPhone. And actually, before I was at the practice now, I would hold my iPhone up to an ocular and get like really good images with just doing it that way. So that can be actually a low expense item as well, but very, very useful from a patient education perspective.
I think that photography is so powerful when you're trying to educate somebody, from something like blepharitis. There are things, I've seen one camera called a lash cam. It was paired with, I forget who even was selling that right now. I feel like it was either paired with a cleanser or paired with a micro exfoliator, but it's called lash cam, and it was like a microscope that would attach to your phone and take a zoomed in picture of the eyelashes, so you could easily just show the patient right there their blepharitis. It might have been, with BlephX, that would make sense, but don't hold me to that. But then I've definitely used my iPhone. I had an iPad that would connect to the oculars. But the one thing that I am looking forward to is having a slit lamp camera that is a little bit more, maybe it was just user failure on my part with my iPhone, but I'm really looking forward to a little bit better quality than what I was capturing. But I have seen some really amazing pictures just from the slit lamp, from photos from the iPhones and the phones. But so I've been looking at Telscreen. They have a good system that connects to a slit lamp. Zeiss actually has some imaging for the slit lamp that I've been looking at, and also Firefly. Firefly can do mybography as well. And I've used that at some of the trade shows when I've been working, with some of the companies just to show doctors how to do certain things. And I've been impressed with all of theirs. But they all do have, it's almost like a luxury car, I feel like, buying an anterior segment camera. It's like, you really want it, but you may never really pay for it. I don't know, you really want it, but it's never going to
really pay for itself, maybe.
Right.
But
But,
yeah,
I think it does because I do really think having the patient understand what's going on, and it's so abstract to just kind of talk them through it, to be able to show it to them, I think is really powerful.
I agree. I mean, certainly from when I'm doing a thermal there, like if I'm doing a tear care procedure and I show them what's happening and what's coming out of their glands, I'll take a video with my anterior segment camera, and
Oh
they'll
yeah,
just be
that's
like,
they're a patient for life after you show them that.
I mean,
Same with same with blepharitis and Demodex. Being able to show them that. I mean, even a patient just to see their eyelashes magnified, they're already bought into whatever you're going to tell them because they've never seen their
yeah,
eyelashes so magnified.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think that I think it's definitely something that you should grow to acquire, as your practice grows. Oh, one thing I just saw that I wanted to tell you about, which is really kind of cool science, is by Advanced Ophthalmic Solutions. Is that AOS? And
Yeah, I think
so
so. Yep.
they don't take the image, but you can upload an image to their software, and it can do a lot of really cool things. Like you can put a grid on it on the cornea. So say you have your fluorescein picture, you can put a grid on it that shows central, temporal, nasal, inferior, superior, and it will count every punctate keratitis in all those zones and tell you. Like,
Yeah,
that's
I know.
amazing.
I saw this technology. This is
Or
crazy.
it will tell you what the conjunctival redness is.
I was just going to say that, like
It's
the
so
level of
cool.
injection. It
Yeah.
is kind of crazy. I
Yeah.
do think this is the way of eye care. Like this is the future of like, it's almost like AI, figuring out how bad your dry eye patient is or how bad that redness is. But yeah, I did see that. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I can only imagine that they'll eventually do the same with mybography. I didn't see that on their platform, but I was really impressed with that. I'm thinking, here I am like counting these things, and this machine is just doing it for you. This software is doing it for you in a second. It's pretty impressive.
It is pretty impressive. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we covered hopefully all of the options from a diagnostic standpoint when we're talking about dry eye. Do you want to just review a few of the treatment options?
Yeah, I think that the treatments are also growing, which is really exciting to see. We still have topical therapeutics, which are so important. You want to create the foundation to help with inflammation, but then you have to be thinking about meibomian gland expression. And now we have lots of tools that help us to do that. And they are ranging from something that does have a small footprint, like the tear care system from Sight Science. It's the size of a hockey puck. You can carry that easily from one exam room to the next. To even iLux is relatively low footprint. It just docks.
Yeah.
So these two are some of the new to the game of meibomian gland expression tools that we could acquire when we're thinking about treatment. Of course, we have the first, which was LipiFlow, thermal pulsation. And that still is a very important part of a dry eye practice and very important part of meibomian gland expression. And then, IPL with the intense pulse light, that is helping so much with inflammation and meibomian gland expression, rosacea, and maybe even things like Demodex. I've seen some papers saying that it's helping in that area too. So it can get very expensive very quickly. And speaking from the point of being, in a dry eye center of excellence in the recent past, I have had access to actually try all of them. I wasn't able to acquire all of them because of just, the cost to do so. So you have to kind of be selective. It's good to see if you can get some hands-on, whether that's in your own office or, if there's any way to meet up with the companies, but being able to kind of understand and get comfortable. So for me, for example, I have a lot of comfort with LipiFlow. I've been doing it since 2012. We were the first center in Pennsylvania to have access to that. So I feel very confident about when I'm going to refer a patient for LipiFlow. I know it works. I feel very confident about that. Took me a little bit more time to get comfortable with the iLux, mostly just because of it's in my hand, the whole treatment, and treating the superior glands takes a little bit more practice for me, but it doesn't mean that it's not something that I would use routinely. It's just that it was just a little bit more cumbersome for me personally. And then the tear care system, just adheres to the eyelid with the smart lid technology. The patient's in the chair with their eyes open, blinking on their phone, for the 15 minutes while the heating. And then, quite frankly, it's kind of fun to do the meibomian gland expression after that. The videos you're showing your patients to scare them at night. But, I feel like it's very powerful. They can see what's coming out of there. And now they have a much better understanding. And then IPL. Yeah, IPL again, very exciting and technology and lots of research kind of mounting on how that is so crucial. And a lot of doctors, pair these treatments together. They'll do
Right.
some kind of expression, and then they'll do IPL. Sometimes they'll alternate it, or they'll do 3 or 4 IPLs and then move on to something like an expression treatment. So there is room to have more than one of those. It's just figuring out when that works best for your practice.
All right, great. This is good. Leslie, anything else you want to cover?
I think that about wraps it up. But there could definitely be some new exciting technology on the horizon that we just don't know about. And so we feel bad leaving anything out. But certainly, share with us anything we might have missed, right? We're always excited to try something new. And now for the To The Point wrap-up. Dry eye disease continues to expand in both the research around treatments and in our diagnostic technologies. It can be overwhelming for anyone getting into dry eye disease, but it doesn't have to be. Remember, start small, build your patient base by using things like questionnaires and your vital dye staining, and then explore options that allow for better diagnostic, whether it be non-invasive tear breakup time, point of care testing, meibography. Look for machinery and technology that can allow for more than one diagnostic test whenever possible to save money to your practice and also save space within your practice. But most importantly, embrace the technology and have fun on this journey.